We have 4 people here, 3 of whom have been on our stage before, so that would be Linton and who's back there? Yes, and Fowler? Right. So the one person we don't know is Dr. Gedeon. So why don't we start with you, the representative for Apria.
You may have killed my first joke.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I really actually planned on coming on after Bruce, so I'm going to have to pivot a little bit here. So I'm actually really impressed by the lineup that is here today. You have CEO, founder, chairman of Canopy. You have Chief Commercial Officer, Aurora. You have CEO, John Fowler of Supreme. And of course, Apria, as the outlier, sends the lawyer to give this talk. So I didn't quite know what I would tell you that you're not going to hear from my competitors. And so as much as I'm an expert in cannabis, I really wanted to talk about something I find more interesting, and that would be myself. And so I promise there's a point, and this will not be a therapy session, but I was relatively certain it was not going to be the subject of any of their presentations. So, as I said, I'm a lawyer. It's the cutest kid you've ever seen, I'm sure. And my, first-generation Canadian. My parents came from Lebanon. I did my doctorate in clinical pharmacology and toxicology. I went to law school. I articled in a Bay Street firm. I was a partner in a Bay Street firm. I got married. I did everything right. And by and large, I would say my parents were relatively proud of me. And so one day, I go to talk to my mother, and I say, Mom, I'm going to leave my respectable, established, beautiful Bay Street office, and I'm going to go into cannabis. And my mother immediately looks at me and says, you're going to be the next El Chapo? And so, the reality was I had to explain to her, I wasn't that different. I was the same boring, anal retentive lawyer I always was, but just in a different context. And so it was really my first lesson in cannabis. And really what it means is to say that reinvention is necessary, particularly in cannabis. And reinvention doesn't have to mean you're any less of the person or the individual that you truly are. And if I could show you an example, think of Madonna. Madonna's always Madonna. Or Chris Pratt. Or, the many faces of Lady Gaga. And reinvention can be something as simple as applying established and known ways of thinking to new and emerging industries. And in cannabis in particular, that's what we're experiencing now. By and large, since last October, the primary focus of our industry, at least the larger players, has been on meeting the demand of production and supply. And as we are maturing, we've kind of figured out how to grow the plant now. We're starting to borrow from pharma. We're starting to borrow from alcohol. We're starting to borrow from blockchain. We're starting to borrow from general consumer products. And actually, some of the most innovative ideas are coming from individuals, I'd like to say like me, who come from established businesses that are moving and migrating into cannabis. So our identity is growing. We started off as toddlers under the predecessor legislation. And I like to say we kind of are like teenagers. We're a little bit like awkward teenagers because we're growing in front of the eyes of the world. And I think everyone can acknowledge there is some costs to growing up as a teenager in front of the world. So most of us, most of the cannabis players, we all look alike. We have similar products, similar quality, similar interactions with the consumer, similar interactions with the regulator. And Canada is effectively being criticized for losing its stronghold on our leadership position. So how do we fix that? And my solution is really, we need to start creating, reinventing our new identities. And we need to use that as our competitive advantage. So what do I mean? Think of McDonald's versus Burger King, Pepsi versus Coke, or even Uber versus Lyft. We need to find our own distinct identities, and we need to reinvent ourselves. And why do we need to reinvent ourselves? Well, the marketplace has changed. The know-how, has changed. And my slides are gone. and the user has changed. So that's the know-how, and that's the user. And it's particularly marked because I think the consumer is pretty much all of us in this room. And so, most importantly, I want to say that the regulator is starting to change. We've gone from a regulator that is quite resistant. They really didn't like us, and most importantly, they didn't trust us as an industry. And we all know that perception is reality in some instances, and their perception of us as an industry created bias and created challenges for us in order to become what we're seeing in the United States as consumer good products. I'll give you an example in real life. My husband is a stay-at-home dad, and that has its own perception bias in real life. But I want to talk about what happens in Mommy and Me class, or rather what doesn't happen in Mommy and Me class. There's not a single woman in the classroom that will actually engage him in conversation unless they've met me first. And they're actually so afraid of the perception of being seen as hitting on him that they basically isolate him. Like, they're literally putting my baby in the corner, literally. And it's the same in cannabis. The regulator really had to spend time with us, had to interact with us and actually address the elephant in the room, that we're not actually drug dealers, but we're really established professionals trying to affect change in the world. It's kind of like if, the ladies in Mommy and Me basically went and said hi, they'd realize my husband just needed adult conversation and not really make an adult film. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we spend a lot of time with regulators. My primary role is I spend time educating foreign governments on the Canadian experience. I help them draft their legislation. And as they spend time with us, this negative stereotypes start to fall away. And so the reinvention of our identity is really the way we're starting to overcome these barriers. If we look at the world now, look at Europe. The legalization of medicinal cannabis is seen throughout Europe. Germany, Poland, Italy, Malta, UK, soon to be France. We see it in Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, South America, which is a country that was largely heavily damaged by these kinds of products, are now all allowing medicinal cannabis. And some of that is through continuous exposure to us as an industry, but also having the benefit of seeing the Canadian experience and realizing that actually crime really hasn't gone up and the sky hasn't fallen. So I call that progress. Or someone, sorry. So someone stopped me and once said to me, rather, thanks for making cocaine the gateway drug for my kid. And I didn't quite know what to say, but then I thought, actually, no, he's kind of right, because by the time we get this through, cannabis is going to be part of the mainstream. And so I grew up really obsessed with Britney Spears. I dyed my hair blonde, I wore green contacts, I dyed my eyebrows. I was super excited when they gave me this microphone because it's exactly like Britney Spears. And to be honest with you, I'm Mediterranean, I'm Lebanese, so it was a lot of damage to my hair. Like if the wind blew, my hair would just shatter. And I clearly was trying to be something that I wasn't. And we have the same sort of existential crisis at Apria. Our competitors, and you see them sitting there, they were cooler and they were faster. and they were constantly in the eye of the regulator. To be honest, they took significant risks, and they were good at it. If you've been following the news about Apria, you'll know that our CEO and founders recently stepped down, and our president resigned. We were having growing issues in our facility, and we have the single largest growing footprint on a single campus in the world. And let me tell you, growing issues are a problem when your slogan is, "We have a good thing growing." So we needed to really examine who we wanted to be. We need to embrace what our true identity was. And so a lot of people meet me and they're like, you're not really what I expected for cannabis. And first I say, thank you. And then I'm like, how dare you? And I think embracing who you truly are not only gives you the competitive advantage, but gives you a sense of comfort to navigate in the market. And I think it's the same for Apria. And so that reception to your identity is what really makes you the differentiator. And so we went on a journey. We wanted to figure out who we were, what we wanted to be, and what we wanted to represent. And we decided that, we want to be a solid company, and we want to be built on corporate social responsibility. And effectively, we reinvented ourselves, or I should say, we are trying to reinvent ourselves. And so I want to share with you what we've done in Colombia. I'm exceptionally proud of this initiative. So prior to establishing our cultivation facility in Colombia, we engaged in a social impact analysis of our presence in that village. We went and we asked the people of the town, what is it that you expect of this company? What is it that you want from us as a company? What we learned is that the people that live in the neighboring village are of an extremely young age, largely female-led households with young children who are looking for better infrastructure and who are looking for job opportunities. And so these were the 4 big priorities that they expressed to us. They expected job opportunities and employment for women. They had a fear regarding the possible uptake or increase in use of cannabis. They were expecting infrastructure, that we would help build the infrastructure going in and out of the village. And surprisingly, they were expecting us to provide cultural, education, entertainment for the area. And so what we've done is we've taken these findings and we've actually used them in the construction of our facility. We have childcare in the facilities. We have actually built an entire agenda and curriculum around this entertainment and cultural initiative that they expect of us. We are building and improving the roads. And the idea there is really to build a symbiotic relationship where particularly people in Colombia can see that cannabis is actually a force for good and not one that destroyed them a while ago. In Canada, we've also launched our corporate values. And why are corporate values important? They don't just speak to your identity, but they create this common language internally and common language in making business decisions. And they express for us what we want to represent to governments around the world. And so we have 4 fundamental tenets. The first one is we put people first. And really, in a nutshell, it means you do you, and we're happy to support you, whatever that choice may be. We respect the earth. I'm significantly proud of the fact that our large campus in Leamington, Ontario, is largely carbon neutral. And so we try to replicate that footprint, no matter where we go in the world. We lead by example, and that speaks to innovation. If you go on our website, you can actually see some of the innovative automation that we've basically created for the cultivation of this industry, of this plant on such an industrial scale. We are mining and creating partnerships around the world with research and development teams that will feed into our operations in order to keep us as a market leader. And finally, we take responsibility to heart. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Apria when we get out of here, and you'll understand. So this one has particular number of layers for us as a company. And the simplest one is really what we're doing going forward. We've partnered with partners like Drug Free Kids in order to educate and equip parents with kits on discussing the responsible use of cannabis. And we're doing the same initiatives around the world with the medical federations in countries like Latin America, the United Kingdom, and Australia. So I can see a little bit of the yawns. It's not sexy cannabis, I get it. They're coming up to talk to you about sexy cannabis. So, but I wanted to indicate that it is the evolution of a business that's becoming legitimate, and we are significant drivers of jobs, of economics, and of governments. And as we move towards adulthood, and if we want to foster the resilience of these businesses worldwide, we need to actually work towards reducing the bias around cannabis, around the cannabis industry. And whether we do that by reinvention or through education, it's the only way we're truly going to unlock the potential of this plant. And so I want to leave you with the great words of the corporate strategist, Dr. Zeus, which I think sums up really the moral of what I'm trying to say. The places I hiked to and the roads that I rambled to find the best eggs that have never been scrambled. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at the store, you have to do things you never thought of before. Thanks.